Hi, and welcome to Mental Health in the Climate Crisis, Why Your Self-Care Matters to Viewers. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Sarah Newman, and just to explain to viewers that I have brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm wearing a white shirt with short sleeves. I'm the executive director of the Climate Mental Health Network, an organization I started 2 years ago because of my own struggles with climate anxiety and other climate emotions. And again, thank you for being here. And I'm excited to be here with Kip Pastor of Pique Action.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kip Pastor. I have brown hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a red button-down shirt. And I am the founder of Pique Action. I'm a producer and filmmaker. And I believe that filmmaking is the most effective medium to disseminate ideas and affect real change around climate. And Pique Action is a media company that tells stories about solutions to climate. And we seek to change the narrative around climate to we can and we are. We're the opposite of doom scrolling. And, I'm really excited to be here. This is going to be an engaging and important workshop about mental health, climate crisis, and storytelling. And you're going to hear a lot from wonderful people and different folks in the space. And we hope that you continue to stay engaged and connect with us afterwards.
Thanks, Kip. I am also really excited about today's workshop. I worked for a dozen years in the media impact space, and so I'm very passionate about the power of films and TV to affect social change and really inspire people to take action. And as I shared before, I started the Climate Mental Health Network because I was struggling with my own climate anxiety. So I really hope that today's webinar will help people who are navigating their own climate emotions and perhaps experiencing burnout from working on climate issues to learn about self-care practices and to understand how the stories you tell in film and TV and other mediums about climate impact people's mental health and often will determine if or how they take climate action. I want to be clear, this is definitely not about advocating for Pollyanna climate stories or myself, anyone else here telling you what to create, but sharing resources and insights to support your well-being and creativity process. As we know, the climate crisis impacts everyone, no matter who you are or where you live. And the same is true of the mental health consequences of the climate crisis. Having climate emotions such as grief, despair, sadness, or anger are all very real and valid emotional responses to the climate crisis. But global research shows that young people, more than any other age group, disproportionately struggle with a range of climate emotions. A 2021 study of 10,000 youth worldwide found that 75%, so the future is frightening, and 4 in 10 do not want to have children because of the climate crisis. And this is also a climate justice issue because those most impacted by the climate crisis are frontline disinvested communities that often do not have the resources to address both the emotional and physical consequences of climate change. So what does this all mean if you're a content creator working on a climate story? First, self-care is essential, as I already said, and self-compassion. We're all very imperfect humans doing the best we can to change a system that has created an existential global crisis. Second, how you feel informs the stories that you tell, and that in turn impacts your viewers. It can impact their brains, their nervous systems, and their emotional states. And the impacts of such stories are essential to people feeling hope, inspired to take action, or despair, doom, and inaction. And the last thing I just want to mention is about breaking old molds in storytelling. A frequent Western model is the hero archetype. There's a lot of emotional baggage and implications with people feeling inadequate when presented with a hero model. This representation influences people's emotional state and inspiration for taking action. And it presents a model that often focuses on an individual rather than the community and collective action, when we know in reality there is no single climate hero that's going to save us. Rather, everyone has a role to play in addressing the climate crisis. And this goes back to our own imperfectionism. It's something that we can embrace in our own lives and in the stories and characters on screen to help us understand and relate to realistic scenarios and characters are just like all of us and struggling with climate anxiety and all the other emotions that I and so many other people are really struggling with. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Leslie Davenport. She is an advisor to the Climate Mental Health Network, a climate psychology educator, a consultant, and a therapist exploring the intersectionality of climate, economics, education, policy, and social justice.
Hi, I'm Leslie Davenport. I have brown hair, brown eyes and glasses, and I'm wearing a blue cable knit sweater. I work as a climate psychology educator and consultant. So I've worked for more than 30 years as a therapist, but my work at this point moves into all kinds of areas, working with organizations, schools, training the mental health field, and I'm really glad to be here with you today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our nervous system and brain and why it's so relevant and important to storytelling related to the climate. So most of you may know about Bill McKibben, one of the founders of Tree50.org, and he tells his story of shifting from being an academic into advocacy work. And in '89, one of his first books called The End of Nature was released, and it hit the charts big. It was a bestseller, translated into many languages. And he said, this is great. You know, people are going to read the book and then change will follow. Well, clearly things didn't go quite that way. And he realized he needed to change tactics because we know that facts alone don't create change. And just ask the people who design stop smoking campaigns. It doesn't matter if people are told that a dozen cancers could affect their health, all basically damage to every part of the body. And it's very similar to how climate change is damaging our living biosphere, that the facts aren't enough. So then it became a question of, well, then let's address the emotions. Okay, images are powerful. Images strike the heart. Some of them bypass our cognitive thinking. Great, but in close to 130 behavioral change studies, strategies that arouse fear, regret, guilt, shame are not very effective. So that if films or stories just depict catastrophe, it's not very effective in getting people to engage around climate change. And we're going to talk more about why. So maybe if we just say it more often and say it more frequently in different ways, should we say it louder? Is there a shock value component? But according to the Center for Climate Strategies in Norway, people experience something called apocalypse fatigue when there's a great deal of difficult climate information coming at them all the time, that they tend to tune it out. And to get louder, and again, these are all natural tendencies, won't quite do it either. And I like what Deborah Tannen at Georgetown University said, which is that smashing heads does not open minds. Okay, so now what? And before we get to the answer, we're going to look a little more deeply at why, kind of lift the hood into our brain and nervous system, particularly our evolutionary psychology. And before I do that, I want to say that those concepts I presented are pretty broad strokes. There's going to always be exceptions, but it's really good to be aware of these as an overall tendency with our social science research. So, particularly in our predominant Western culture, we like to think of ourselves as rational, that we're in control decision makers. And to some degree, that's true. But when threats, when risks, when danger increases, which we certainly have with the climate crisis, that rational part of our mind actually starts to go offline, and our emotional, less conscious parts of our brain get activated. And people generally don't even recognize this is happening. This is a subconscious, unconscious shift that happens. And with our evolutionary psychology, we are not very well equipped to be in uncertainty, especially when there is high risk. And that stress and anger just starts to amplify. And what this is described in terms of neuroscience is that we get amygdala hijacked. The amygdala is the part of the brain that responds to threats, responds to fear, and it becomes very activated, and the neural activity in the rational part of our brain decreases. And this can be seen on functional MRIs. It's even been measured that about 15 points of conventional IQ decrease when we have this much emotional activation. So this is a really helpful concept that comes out of trauma work that's helpful to put all this into perspective. We all have what can be called a window of tolerance or a zone of resilience. And within there, we're dealing with all kinds of pressures, stresses, responsibilities of life. And we tend to flow up and down with it. And it's in this realm that we're able to bring our best selves forward. And in the case of climate change, be engaged, be part of creating a healthier, safer world. But when it's too much, whether it's too much information or too big of a disruption to our lives, and we don't have the capacity to attend to it emotionally, we either go into hyperarousal, which is very reactive, often an angry outburst, knee-jerk reaction, or we numb out and check out. And as you can imagine, either of those states, that's when that amygdala hijacking has happened. And this is common sense things that happen in day-to-day life too. Maybe you've experienced that time when you just have to back away from a difficult situation or a difficult conversation. Do some self-care, as Sarah was talking about, and then come back and be able to re-engage. So the challenge with media is, how can we help people engage in a way that doesn't push them into one end or the other based on the intensity or pacing of climate change news? And here's one of the ways we see it showing up these days, where people are lacking that capacity to build and even stretch their window of tolerance, is that they look for a place, and this is an unconscious process that happens. This isn't a conscious thing that they decide to do, where they just need to get out of the sense of overwhelm and distress. And often it'll go toward not so much denial as much anymore, but what's called disavowal, that sense that, well, yeah, climate change is real, but what can I do? So I'm just going to go about business as usual, take care of my own life. Somebody will figure this out, which gets them out of the distress of what we're in fact all facing. There's really no way to step away from it. Or it slides into doomism. And Sarah was referencing some of the youth studies where this is showing up a lot. This isn't so much which is more accurate from our climate science perspective, but what's happening emotionally to try and seek relief. Doomism is a version of, it's too big, it's too late, what can I do anyway? Oh, well, it's too late, I'm going to go about business as usual. And there are many other versions of this, but perhaps in describing these, you've seen it in others or recognize moments within yourself. All of this is quite dynamic. And so in learning to stretch our window of tolerance, the good news is that it's not fixed. we have to do it with care, and we have to do it intentionally. This quote from Caroline Hickman, she's a psychologist in the UK and was one of the researchers behind that youth study, says, not only do we need to grow up in our climate crisis by cultivating imaginative, creative, determined, and hopeful capacities, these solution-oriented stories, but we also have to learn to tolerate the hard stuff that goes along with this, the guilt, the shame, and anxiety and depression. We all have to learn to stretch our window of tolerance. But if you think of it like wanting to stretch a muscle at the gym in a workout, you can't just try and reach your goal without doing it little by little, right? It would create more damage. It would create more injury. You would not be hitting your goal. It would actually slow things down. Same is true emotionally. So how do we do that? And how do we do that in storytelling? We do it by something called toggling or titrating. And again, this comes out of trauma research. So it's moving back and forth between being truth tellers, compassionate storytellers that help us stretch, while also looking at solutions and where the good work is happening, and including the message that we all have a voice, all have a part to play, that everyone's perspective and energy and efforts are necessary and important, and how to get a sense of that timing of navigating those different components and not just do all one or the other, because as Sarah was saying, if we only did the feel good parts, it might be a little too sugar coated, but we can't just do the catastrophe parts either, or we will lose people. And there has never been a time where engagement, connecting, joining has been more vital perhaps than it is now. So in a nutshell, a quick summary based on neuroscience: effective communication happens when we include what people are feeling. Sarah named some of the range, from the grief and the rage to the moments of inspiration and excitement, and to normalize how much this is a part of it, that we can't just look at what's happening, what we think of as outside of us. It's very much interrelated to what's happening inside of us, and they're always influencing each other. We have to build the resilience and support our ability to tolerate more through this toggling or titrating rhythm. As tempting as it is, it doesn't work to bully people out of their worldview. But if we can make climate change personal, about the things that matter to people, about how to create that safer, healthier world for our communities now, for our kids and grandkids in the future, for our neighborhoods, for our world. So it's about almost like a partnership or a collaboration with the audience, that everyone's voices and actions matter, and particularly being attentive to it fluctuates, it changes based on the nature of community. So being attentive to diversity and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. Show how, again, as Sarah said, this isn't the hero's journey necessarily, that regular people are making a difference. This is a political issue, and there needs to be large systemic shifts within a social justice foundation, but it's still people in these roles, and working at it from a humanistic view matters. We can normalize climate-friendly actions and behaviors, and we can be creative. We are in a new world, a new time. We are finding new ground with this. Creativity and imagination is so crucial. This requires rational processing and imaginative processing. and things are changing rapidly. We can't land. We have to stay flexible and attentive. And we have to work from our full human experience, emotionally, rationally, creatively, because ultimately that will create health and resilience. So back to Bill McKibben for a moment. You know, when asked further along in his journey, it's like, well, what do we need to make the needed change? You've been looking at this for decades. And he says, well, you know, there's no silver bullet. We need silver buckshot. I've kind of changed it to a seed motif, but the point is there. So is the film and television industry a nugget of silver buckshot that will wake some people up? Absolutely. In fact, it's a big one because it reaches so many people. And especially when those stories can be guided from emotionally intelligent principles from neuroscience, it's quite potent. So really, the film, any kind of media industry is in a remarkable role at this time. Connection is more essential than ever, and creativity when there is a collective failure of imagination. Film and media can work with all those parts of our brain. Our minds, our hearts can be informational, it can be evocative, it can influence behavior, and there can be a sense of compelling possibility. So the climate crisis, we know, is deep and far-reaching, and so can be the storytelling. We need nothing short of transformation, and perhaps those of you watching this were made for these times. So I've presented a few college degrees worth of information in about 10 or 15 minutes. I know this may have raised as many questions as it has answered, so just know that you're welcome to reach out to me through my website. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Leslie. That was incredibly insightful, deeply relatable for me, and I think for the whole audience. I particularly enjoyed hearing about the sequencing is important, focusing on solutions and building resilience with stretching our window of tolerance. I relate to that very much. In fact, you know, one of the things I learned recently was that from 2020 to 2021, Google searches for climate anxiety grew by 565%. I think you can say that that's fairly ubiquitous now. So I started Pique Action because I was tired of seeing polar bears floating out to sea, fires, floods. These are all of the visual imagery that we think of when we talk about climate change. And, you know, that kind of content just hasn't really moved the needle. In fact, what it does for all of us and what it does for me is it reaffirms this negative feedback loop of fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. And we know that behavioral science teaches us that when we feel positive about our actions, we are more motivated to continue to act. And so that evidence would suggest that the more positive messaging, the more effective than anything else that could induce guilt. So at Pique, we like to focus on human stories about solutions. We focus on climate technologies, nature-based solutions. We're producing a series right now that connects technologies with the global south. And I think that, you know, like what Sarah said at the beginning, I think there's an important distinction to make here between solutions-oriented stories, hope-filled narratives, and then having rose-colored glasses and just ignoring that there's a problem, that there's enormous tragedy in front of us. I am filled with anxiety and fear about climate. I worry for my children and children growing up in areas and regions in the world that will be most profoundly impacted by climate. And most of those folks are not responsible for that impact. But one of the ways that I deal with my anxiety is I work on climate. And I find that there's a shared catharsis of other folks who have dedicated their lives and their creative energies to working in climate. And there is no doubt that it's exhausting and that we all need support and we all need to take a break and build the resilience, but also recognize that there's time that we need to slow down. And I think that, you know, frankly, the Hollywood Summit is something that is amazing because it brings us together to share, to learn more, and to dance. And I think we also know that stagnation and nihilism and inertia is really what we're fighting against. And action, togetherness, community, and hope are what really can push us forward. So by changing the conversation to focus on what we can do as individuals, but recognizing that without fundamental systemic change, those individual actions won't get us all the way there. And so together we can drive towards action and motivation for continued action by inspiring each other, recognizing where we are, and supporting each other. So I think of it as an ultra marathon. It's not going to be solved overnight. And we would like to imagine a world where it'll look like something where we could get it right. And I think stories are incredibly important to do that. I think human narratives are really helpful in that process as well. And a direct human connection is always good. So with that, I am super thrilled to announce two of the Climate Mental Health Network Gen Z advisors. We have Sage Palmetto. She is a multidisciplinary artist and scientist seeking to understand and heal the collective body of Earth through nature-based audiovisual content, music, collages, sketches, and photography. And also Aisha Nieta Brown, who is a researcher, climate storyteller, and advocate for vulnerable populations. So welcome.
Hi everyone. My name is Sage. I am, as Kip said, I'm an artist and scientist. You could say I'm an energy healer and also a music producer. And today, Aisha and Yenta and I are gonna showcase a sound meditation project that we're working on with the Climate Mental Health Network to facilitate an embodied listening experience of the spatial surroundings around you, combined with music, combined with that sense of being home on Earth.
Yeah, thank you, Sage. And my name is Aisha Nieta Brown, and I am a researcher, a climate storyteller, and an advocate for vulnerable populations. And I'm really excited to share what we've co-produced together.
Yeah, so Aisha Nieta and I are crafting this kind of a sound journey that we're going to upload on streaming services that kind of takes you on a meditative journey through different experiences of your own energy, of the Earth's energy, through a mixture of sonic soundscapes, music experiences, and guided meditative poetry, spoken word from Aisha Nieta. So Aisha Nieta, do you want to explain your philosophy and role as part of this project?
Yeah, so Heartbeat of Home is something that is meant to sort of connect the person listening to themselves and Earth in a way that is energy based, and I have written each track as this story narrative to guide them on that visualization grounding process through the words and the way that the words and phrases are shaped. It really helps us to do what we need to do as we ground throughout the series. So we kind of go on, each episode is its own story arc, which helps the listener ground and really just visualize what these textures are that they're hearing, and what these beautiful sonic tunes that Sage has put to the words. And it's just this whole experience. It's a different way to look at media and meditation.
Thank you for sharing that. I will kind of walk through the general philosophy of like why we felt that this was needed, this artistic creation that we're putting together. So basically we're coming at it with the philosophy that deep listening is nature's intelligence. Yeah. So we're coming at this with the philosophy that deep listening is nature's form of intelligence, where there's so many different life forms that communicate in so many different ways, so many different vibrations and scales of time that different life forms live by. And all of this is happening in this rich ecological tapestry of communication that exists all around us, whether we're consciously tapping into that awareness or not. It is there. And my first experience with this was in my ecology semester abroad in the rainforest of Panama, which is where some of these photos came from. But also our body has all of those intersecting layers of vibrational communicating intelligence as well. It's not just in our brain, but it's in our whole body as we're breathing in, the pulses that you can feel everywhere in your body. And this is all interacting with everything around you. So as a medical student, I felt like this was a perspective that was kind of missing from the framework of healing. And right now, it just in general, a lot of the health crises that we have are caused from that disconnect from that sensibility of being connected from our surroundings. We're kind of in these cyclical loops of consumption and stress. And we just really wanted to create an art piece together that would help address like the climate crisis at a root cause level, essentially, bringing us back into that sense of gratitude, embodiment, and awareness of connection. So that's the impetus behind our project, and it's been a wonderful time working together. I think both of us really feel like we're channeling the creative energy of the earth into the work that we're putting together. So that's just been a real treat. And I think we also are excited about exploring different ways of connecting. So the track that I'll be playing you from our piece has a little bit more of a beat to it. So the intention here is that if you wanted to do a moving meditation or dance a little bit and feel the energy in your body that way, this track can facilitate that sort of experience. All right, so I'm going to play this for you all.
A lot of times, when we aren't fully present in our own bodies, we fail to realize how beautiful our own beating heart really is. To anyone who is listening, just take some time to be still enough to feel your beating heart. It is almost as if your heart whispers to you. It is so quiet but powerful. Powerful enough to keep you afloat within the gravity of Earth. Earth kind of has that same kind of whisper. If you go outside and put your feet on the ground, it makes you feel different than if you are standing on a tile floor inside for hours. Standing on the sand or moss, or imagine that you're standing on the sky. On the tops of tree canopies, you could see how alive things really are that way. And we should appreciate it more. Not only because it is visually beautiful to us, but because it means something to each of us personally. The earth isn't just here to be preserved. The earth is here to be alive and live just like us. Its purpose is to serve and give and to love and live just like ours is to serve and love and give and live. We aren't just here to be preserved in our own beauty, to be preserved in our own minds, to be preserved in our own fear, or to be preserved in our own hopes. We are here to be alive and to be free. Just as the wind might be still one day but blows the next so passionately, how could you resist being grateful to breathe? How could you resist being grateful to have a beautiful, beautiful heartbeat? Your heart is beating. Life is frail and life is fragile. But life never ends. Well, at least not in the way that we would imagine it to. Earth is full of all the energy of the past, present, and future. Existence is more than just a linear time. Life is so beautiful. Life is beyond what we could even imagine it really is. And the energy of gratitude and the energy of peace truly guides us to be. To just be. Your heart is beating. To just be.
Thank you all so much for listening, and hope this gets you excited for a new type of meditation and connectedness with self, with earth, and in relation to community. And we're looking forward to releasing very soon.
Yeah, thank you guys. The evolution was beautiful. I was deeply in it the whole time. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Sage and Aisha and Yetta. I love what you're doing. It's genius and it's so needed. So huge thank you. So now Kip and I are just going to offer some resources. And there's also going to be some links that are listed with the webinar. If you go to the Climate Mental Health website, again, these will be listed with the webinar, which is climatementalhealth.net. There's tons of free resources available to download in English and Spanish. This includes things like we have an art therapy guide for climate emotions, guides for parents to talk to their kids about climate emotions, taking action and self-care worksheets, lots of self-care tips, resources for teachers, a huge list of recommended books that's linked on our bookshop.org page, and an incredible film that was produced in last year's summit, and it's called Gen Z Mental Health Climate Stories. And there's lots more information and resources on the website. And the other thing I wanted to just add is that we also work with content creators, and we were an impact partner for the Apple TV show Extrapolations. And we also have a monthly newsletter and lots of content on Instagram and LinkedIn. So definitely follow us on those platforms. And then the last thing is that we do lots of events in person and online, webinars on lots of different topics. And we recently just hosted an amazing event in LA. So please check out our website, climatementalhealth.net, to explore and download. And also on that site, you will see links to people like Leslie Davenport. And last thing is, please reach out to connect. We are always excited to hear from people and to connect and partner with organizations. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Kip to share about the amazing resources of Pique Action.
Thank you, Sarah. To start, you can go to piqueaction.com for a lot of resources around climate and storytelling. We have action pointing people in all sorts of different kinds of directions. If you're looking for hope or inspiration, jobs, peer groups, other opportunities, you can find it at piqueaction.com. If you're a storyteller and you're a visual storyteller, please reach out. If you're looking for jobs and educational resources, I'm going to point you away from Pique just for a minute. You can check out Terra.do. If you're looking to be inspired by builders and climate technologies and businesses, you should listen to the My Climate Journey podcast. If you're looking for some really clear calls to action and getting involved in campaigns and advocacy, there's incredible playbooks with the climate change makers. And if you need a dose of fact-checked, anxiety-free content, the Happy Broadcast on Instagram is a place that I always go to. And if you want to reach me directly, I'm Kip at piqueaction.com, and you can find us everywhere. I want to thank everybody again for joining the workshop today. We're really grateful for your time and your energy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kip. It was great to be here with you today. And thank you to Leslie and Sage and Aisha and Yetta. And thank you everyone who has watched today and just for being here with us. And, just to circle back to what I talked about at the beginning, is just remember you are not alone. We're all in this together. And whatever emotions you are feeling about the climate crisis, these are valid, normal emotions to have and a very rational response to the climate crisis. And so with that, I just want to take one last moment to just take one more pause to breathe and just take in one more deep inhale and exhale. And again, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you so much to the Hollywood Climate Summit and everyone working at the Hollywood Climate Summit to make this workshop and the entire summit a huge success. Thank you.
Yeah, grateful to Hollywood Climate Summit for bringing us all together. Thank you, guys.